Good morning, church. It is July 13th, and hope you guys are doing great. And we are in another week of going through our morning devos with Bo-O. And today we make all things new. Yes, we're in Revelation chapter 21. And it is a great chapter, and it is a long chapter that we're going to read through together and just pull out some good stuff out of it. And let's just get right into it. I hope you guys had a great weekend and you're ready to just get focused. So it says this is after the tribulation period, after the millennial kingdom, after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And then, and hopefully you guys studied the resurrections, and hopefully you guys studied deaths. You don't want to take part in the second death. You do want to take part in the first resurrection. And we saw what was called the Great White Throne Judgment. So, you just look at the book of Revelation. It's really cool. I mean, it's so neat. And I was talking to a sister the other day at church, and we were she was mentioning how much she's enjoying the Devo. And I totally appreciate that. And what she's enjoying is just staying in this book and really going through it. So, yeah, it's great. Now, I'll tell you this about chapter 21 is that just as I don't understand much of what life must have been like for Adam and Eve in the garden, I certainly am not going to sit here and tell you that I understand what's going on in chapter 21 as well, with a new heaven and new earth. And you'll see why, because the next statement says, "For the first heaven and the first earth have passed away." So this is very much a little similar to the language of Isaiah chapter 65, verse 17, that says, "Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered or come into mind." That is interesting. The former things shall not be remembered or come into mind. Wow, that's really, really interesting. So this is a creation of the new heavens and the new earth. And I want you to get one thing at the beginning too, is that here we see heaven and earth coming together. And this is kind of the point of God's reconciliation, move towards reconciliation throughout the Bible, is that God is uniting His kingdom with and the redeeming of the fallen kingdom to bring them together, to unite them together in fellowship, koinonia, right? Fellowship together, intimacy, drawing those together. So it says, "For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." So at this point I don't understand anything, because now my brain just went tilt, just trying to even think about this. When I think about other dimensions or string theory, if you've ever read books on string theory that says, I think there's 11 dimensions, and you get into, I grew up watching Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone, so I love the idea of dimensions and those kind of things. I start thinking that way when I read this kind of stuff. It's just like, wow, what is going on here? It's pretty radical. The first heaven had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. So there's a lot of picturesque stuff going on here, right? Jerusalem being the place of God, right? The city of God. Dressed as a bride. How does a city get dressed as a bride? Right? It definitely is, very interesting language, right? But similar language biblically. I want you to understand that too. This is all really similar to what the Bible in its entirety talks about. That God's people would be like a bride. That God has a place, a land, a people, a kingdom. This kind of idea. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, And this is, remember, Paul or John is in this vision, right? And so he sees the throne open, and a lot of things are coming from the throne, the judgments, the voices, those kind of things that are declaring things to him. So he hears a loud voice coming from the throne saying, "Now the dwelling of God is with men." That is a huge underlying statement right there, right? Isn't that cool? And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Now the dwelling of God is with men." So obviously it shows that right now the dwelling of God is not entirely with men, right? That's right. So when someone says, like when I was young and I said, "Man, if God's real, why doesn't he show himself?" And I didn't realize, but the proof that God is real is that he doesn't show himself. That's really the proof that God is real, is that he doesn't show himself. Because what God says by not showing up is that something is wrong. Something is there that we all know as human beings. Something's wrong, and that's why we argue against God. That's why we say things like, if God were real, he would show up in the sky. He would show up here. He would do this miracle. He would do that. Because we know in our hearts that something is wrong, but yet our stubbornness, sin has just hardened our hearts incredibly, where instead of humbling us to make us go, something's wrong and it's us, we go, something's wrong and it's God. And so with that caveat there, we get the idea here that now the final victory is God has won, right? That God is with mankind. When you see the word men, by the way, you don't have to think of it as just a man, because if you look up the word in the Greek, it just means mankind. So, and he will live with them. Isn't that cool? So these are huge words. God will live with you. What a neat idea, right? Now, it's a fearful idea when we're in our sin. That's for sure. I mean, it's a fearful idea to know that God would dwell with you. Knowing we're sinners. But that's the beautiful thing about reading John chapter 5, right? Is we've passed from, condemnation to life. And, check out John chapter 5 and read that. That's a great one, right? And he will live with them, and he will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the older things has passed away. So the laws of thermodynamics, the natural laws that we are familiar with here on this planet, seem to now have are altered. And so that's why it's hard for me to quite grab exactly what's going on. So there you go. Yeah, try to wrap your mind in that framework. All I can think of is that in another, like sometimes when I read things on space, when you read of things in like the time and gravity and speed and things, speed of light and things of that nature, when you read about that, you kind of read about this warpingness of time and how things can change. In the relationship between those things I mentioned. And when we read that, we kind of go, whoa, that means like if I go this speed in time, this will happen, and it's different from what we experience on the earth. And the answer is, well, yeah, in theory, sure. Yeah, that's how it works. And all I can imagine is that this is another different kind of situation like that, where there's different laws, different things happening, and no more death or mourning. And that's hard for us to believe. Everything in our world is just based off of death and life cycle, so it's really difficult for us to understand this. Or pain, or for the old order of things has passed away. I tell you though, man, I think as you get older, you probably look at that passage and you just go, man, that's a beautiful passage, right? There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. It's all passed away. So instead of you passing away, all these other things that are related to death will pass away, and you are with God. You live with God. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Another beautiful statement, right? And he said, write down this, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it's done. It is done. That sounds kind of a lot like Jesus on the cross, right? It is completed. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life. These are references to Old Testament passages. You need to look them up. Alpha and Omega. You can look up that one, beginning and end. And you can look up this passage too, thirsty. Look up thirsty in the Bible. You're going to come up with some cool things. And some really interesting passages. And some that sound very much just like this. To him who is thirsty, I will give to drink without cost. Meaning it's going to be free. It's going to be given to you. Salvation is free. Isn't that cool? It's just given to you. How does that change your mind, your world today, right? When you just think of that. Without cost. You don't have to do something. There's not a requirement there. It's simply you trust in the work of God for you. He who overcomes will inherit all this. And you know what it says that in the book of 1 John, it says those who are the overcomers are those of faith, those who trust. And I will be his God, and he will be my son. The idea of intimate relationship, right? Parental relationship, closeness, security, things of that nature. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, and those who practice magic arts, the idolaters and the liars, their place will be in the lake of fire, of burning sulfur. This is the second death. So that's the second time that we've seen the term second death happened. Now, we all have been cowardly, unbelieving, vile, murderers, sexually immoral, and those who practice drugs, idolaters, and liars. And for those reasons, the book of Colossians says the wrath of God comes upon the world because of disobedience, right, to the law of God. And all of us, when we read that, go, "Whoa, that's pretty intense." That's. I mean, we've all been there. But again, you got to remember John 5, that those who have trusted, and this is the point of Jesus, right, is come to give you the free gift, right? For all who are thirsty, right? You can come and drink, and you can buy, or you can partake. Isaiah, I think 55, you might want to look up and read about that, and that God has something for you. And it's found in Yeshua, in Jesus, forgiveness of sins. That's what he came to do. Read the book of Colossians, chapters 1 and 2. Just amazing, right? He's wiped out the handwriting of requirements that we needed to do to uphold the holy, righteous God. And Jesus has wiped that out. It's a free gift. So for all those who, though, just want to continue in their rebellion against Christ and just say, hey, we don't need forgiveness. I don't need forgiveness. Again, it's God's fault that God doesn't do what I want him to do. It is God's fault. It's not on me. It's not on me at all. It's on God to do it. And that's how mankind dictates things. And with that stubbornness, then you will not want to be in the presence of a holy God at this time. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And he carried me away in the Spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. So we got a panoramic view now, right? John is like in a movie theater, man. He's just getting it all. And he sees this holy city, Jerusalem, right? An amazing, it says in the Spirit to a mountain. We saw that mountain can represent governments, right? People, great and high, and coming down from heaven from God. And it shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, like a jasper, like a crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and with 12 angels at the gates. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And there were 3 gates on the east, 3 on the north, 3 on the south, 3 on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So it's really cool, kind of the honoring of the 12 tribes and the honoring of the 12 apostles that are here mentioned as well. Verse 15, the angel who talked with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and its walls. Remember, we saw this in Revelation where the angel had a rod and he was measuring the temple at one point, right? And said, leave out the court of the Gentiles. Well, now we see this angel measuring with the measuring rod and to measure this bride, right? This beautiful city, this beautiful place of God's people, right? And its city, its gates, its walls, and the city was laid out like a square. So it was like a Rubik's cube. Really interesting. As long as it was wide, right? And it measured the city with the rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia, which is about 1,400 miles or 2,200 kilometers in length, and its width and as wide and high as it is long. He measured its wall, and it was 144 cubits thick, which is about 200 feet, by man's measurements, which the angel was using. That's just a little insight from John, right? He must have been like, he was a fisherman, right? But he must have knew his measurements well, because I love that little like measurement of a man, and that's what the angel used, by the way. And the wall was made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, as pure as glass. The foundations of the city walls were decored with every kind of precious stone. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third, and it goes on with all of these beautiful crystals and gems. And it says, verse 21, the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl. The great street of the city was of pure gold, like transparent glass. Now, I laugh because I'm just like, kind of like, this is so interesting. I feel like it's so sci-fi'd out. And, you know, one thing about sci-fi, if you have ever been a follower of it, is like people used to always think, oh, this stuff isn't real, right? This isn't real. This sci-fi stuff ain't real. And then what happens is as the days go along, right, it's like, it is real. All of a sudden you see that, oh my gosh, yeah, that is real. And you know, technology is caught up, or our understanding of things is caught up to what we considered sci-fi. So it's really interesting. Now, I've seen some interesting things in my day, and I won't get too into it right now, but I remember me and Sylvia and April, we were driving on a road in Tucson, and we stopped at night, and because we saw something huge in the sky, and I'm hey, sobriety, sober, okay. And we all got out of the car and we just looked at this thing and we were like, what is that? And I remember after that thing that we saw, I remember it was so different looking and so interesting. It was hard to even describe, kind of. And sometimes things are like that, you know, where you see things and they're just hard to kind of wrap your mind around. Your brain is trying to figure something out and it just can't. you have a hard time describing or using words. And some people have bigger vocabularies than other people. And I'm pretty impressed, actually, with John's vocab, by the way, to name off all of these gems from verse 19 down to 21. But sometimes it just even your vocab is limited, even if it's a wide range vocabulary. And so, John's doing an amazing job, and God's given him some really grace here to spell this out. And he's taken his time to really spell this out because the bride is that cool, man. It's that awesome that he wants to, the things of God are really neat and exciting to him, which is really cool. Verse 22, and I did not see a temple in the city. That would have been bizarre for the Jew, right? No temple in the city. What's up with that? Because the Lord Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. Isn't that cool? The temple isn't the main thing. It's what the temple points to that's the main thing. And when now you have what the temple is pointing to there, then you don't need the temple anymore. And so it says the city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp. So it's its source, right? The nation will walk by its light or its source, right? And the kings of the earth will bring their splendor to it. Again, you see the kings of the earth. It's very interesting that it mentions that, right? The kings of the earth will bring their splendor to it. So we know that it started off by saying that there's a new heaven and new earth. So I take it these are kings within the new earth that are going on, that are going to be bringing their splendor to it. And on no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought to it. Nothing impure will ever enter it, nor will anything who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. So you really get the idea that John's trying to get at, that there's going to be no more defect. And I think he's done his best to try, or the Lord through John has done a good job to try to bring that point home, that no defect will be there. So there's a lot of hope in that for us, that that's always a wonderful idea for all of us, is that one day there won't be a defect. And just like a TV, when it has a defect, something's a little off on it, something's wrong on it. And we kind of run like that, where we might run good for a few years, but then all of a sudden we got some defect. And you might be frustrated that, man, you can never get rid of that defect. It always seems to be there. But the promise of God is that He's taking care of that defect. First, it's in Jesus. And then it's through that life of Christ that we start this new road to where there's no more crying, no more pain, none of that. There's a promise of a uniting totally, completely with God. And so a really cool, amazing ending section. We got one more chapter to go, but isn't that amazing? It's like at the beginning of the Bible, mankind's together with God, and then at the end of the Bible is the uniting once again. It took all that time in between, right? Woo! That time in between was quite a mess, and that's why it's neat when you see a baby that's born. It's precious. And then you see an older person who passes away is precious. And there's a lot that's happened in between, man. There's totally a ton that's happened in between. But it's the bookmarks are beautiful, aren't they? Yeah. So, hey, you guys have a great day, okay? And man, bathe in that chapter. That's quite a chapter. So we'll talk to you guys later, okay? Have a great Monday. Bye-bye.